Phoenix, Arizona. July 10, 2001. Special Agent Kenneth Williams sits at his desk in the FBI's Phoenix field office, writing a memo that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He's been an FBI agent for about a decade, former San Diego police officer, works counter-terrorism. His colleagues consider him one of the best in the office. The memo he's writing is 5 pages long. It's addressed to the Osama bin Laden unit and the Radical Fundamentalist unit at FBI headquarters in Washington. He's also sending copies to the New York field office counter-terrorism squad. The subject line reads, Zacarias Mustafa Subra. IT Other Islamic Army of the Caucasus. The message is direct and urgent. Williams is warning headquarters about a pattern he's noticed. An inordinate number of Middle Eastern men with possible terrorist connections are attending civil aviation schools in Arizona. He suspects this might be part of a coordinated effort by Osama bin Laden to send students to the United States for flight training. He makes 4 recommendations. Assemble a list of civil aviation schools nationwide. Establish contact with those schools. Share his theory with the broader intelligence community. Obtain visa information on foreign nationals applying to flight schools. He sends the memo electronically through the FBI's internal system. It reaches FBI headquarters in Washington within minutes. 63 days later, 19 men hijack 4 airplanes. 3 of those planes hit their targets. Nearly 3,000 people die. And in the wreckage of that day, investigators discover something troubling.
Orders on the scene.
Okay. A big explosion has just occurred. Everyone is running from the entire financial district now. The smoke is filling the entire area. Let's go. Come on, go, Brad, go. Stop shooting.
Williams's memo had reached at least a dozen FBI officials at headquarters. None of them had acted on it. Some later claimed they never even read it. The memo Williams sent on July 10th had warned about exactly the kind of pattern the 9/11 hijackers were following. But his warning had disappeared into the FBI system and never came out.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Of the Pentagon.
Certainly haven't read on anything like this.
Now this is what it looked like moments ago.
The story begins more than a year before Williams writes his memo. In April 2000, Williams opens a counter-terrorism investigation in Phoenix. The target is a Lebanese student named Zacarias Subra, who's enrolled at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Prescott, Arizona. Embry-Riddle is one of the premier aviation schools in the country. Students come from all over the world to learn to fly commercial aircraft. Williams has received information from a confidential source that Subra has connections to extremist groups, specifically the Islamic Army of the Caucasus, which has ties to Al-Qaeda. As Williams investigates Subra, he starts noticing something unusual. There are other Middle Eastern students at Arizona flight schools who also have concerning backgrounds. Some have expressed support for Osama bin Laden. Some have connections to radical Islamic groups. Some have made statements supporting anti-American violence. Williams is a methodical investigator. He doesn't jump to conclusions. But over the course of 2000 and into 2001, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Arizona has several major aviation training facilities. And at multiple schools, Williams keeps finding students with terrorist connections or sympathies. He talks to colleagues in the Phoenix office. They agree the pattern is concerning, but Phoenix is just one field office. They can't see what's happening at flight schools across the entire country. Williams decides someone at FBI headquarters needs to know about this. Someone who can see the bigger picture. Someone who can check flight schools nationwide. In July 2001, he sits down to write the memo. Williams doesn't write a speculative memo. He writes a detailed intelligence communication backed by a year of investigation. His central assessment is clear. He believes Osama bin Laden may be coordinating an effort to place operatives in US civil aviation schools. Not for regular pilot careers, for something else. The memo names several individuals Williams has investigated. It describes their connections to extremist groups. It explains why their presence at flight schools is concerning. Williams also includes context. He references a fatwa by a radical Islamic cleric named Omar Bakri Mohammed Fostok, who once ran a group dedicated to overthrowing Western governments. Williams notes this cleric has called for establishing operatives in Western aviation. Then Williams makes his 4 specific recommendations. These aren't vague suggestions. They're concrete steps FBI headquarters could take immediately. First, compile a nationwide list of civil aviation schools. This would give the FBI visibility into where foreign nationals are training to fly commercial aircraft. Second, establish liaison with those schools. Make them aware that the FBI is interested in students with potential terrorist connections. Create a reporting channel. Third, discuss his theory with the broader US intelligence community. The CIA, NSA, and other agencies might have information that connects to what Williams is seeing in Phoenix. Fourth, seek authority to obtain visa information from the State Department on foreign nationals applying to flight schools. This would allow the FBI to flag potential threats before they even arrive. Williams marks the memo routine priority. In FBI procedure, that means it typically takes 60 days to move through the chain of command at headquarters. He's not expecting an immediate response. He's expecting headquarters to read it, evaluate it, and decide whether to pursue his recommendations. On July 10, 2001, he sends the memo. It arrives at FBI headquarters in Washington within minutes. FBI headquarters in Washington is a massive organization, thousands of employees, hundreds of different units and division, multiple layers of management. Williams's memo arrives electronically in the FBI's internal messaging system. It's addressed to specific units: the Osama bin Laden unit and the Radical Fundamentalist unit in the Counterterrorism Division. The memo reaches several people: the unit chief of the Radical Fundamentalist unit, an analyst in that unit, the acting unit chief of the Osama bin Laden unit, 3 analysts in the bin Laden unit. But this is summer 2001, and FBI headquarters is drowning in threat information. The intelligence community is receiving an unprecedented volume of warnings about potential terrorist attacks. CIA Director George Tenet later describes this period as a time when the system was blinking red. There are warnings about attacks overseas, warnings about attacks on US interests abroad, general warnings about heightened threat levels. The FBI is also still heavily focused on investigating the October 2000 bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen, which killed 70 American sailors. That investigation is consuming significant resources. In this environment, Williams's memo gets lost. Later investigations will reveal that several FBI officials who were listed as addressees on the memo never saw it. The FBI's electronic communication system had delivered it, but in the flood of daily intelligence traffic, the memo never rose to the attention of senior officials who might have acted on it. The request for a nationwide canvass of flight schools is marked closed. Officials decide the FBI doesn't have enough manpower to conduct such a comprehensive investigation based on the information in the memo. Critically, the memo is not widely distributed. It reaches the New York field office, which has experienced counter-terrorism agents, but it's not sent to other field offices across the country. It's not shared with the CIA or other intelligence agencies. It's not escalated to FBI Director Robert Mueller or to Acting Director Thomas Pickard. Williams's warning about a coordinated effort to place terrorists in flight schools simply disappears into the bureaucracy. And 1 month later, something happens in Minnesota that makes the Phoenix Memo's disappearance even more tragic. August 16, 2001, Minneapolis, Minnesota. FBI agents arrest a man named Zacarias Moussaoui at a flight school. A flight instructor had become suspicious. Moussaoui was a French citizen of Moroccan descent who had paid $8,000 in cash to train on a Boeing 747 flight simulator. But he only wanted to learn how to steer the plane in mid-air. He didn't want to learn how to take off or land. The Minneapolis FBI office investigates. They quickly discover that Moussaoui has connections to Islamic extremist groups. He's been to Al-Qaeda training camps in Afghanistan. He has ties to known terrorists. The Minneapolis agents become increasingly alarmed. They believe Moussaoui is planning something catastrophic. One agent will later testify that he was trying to make sure Moussaoui did not take control of a plane and fly it into the World Trade Center. Minneapolis requests permission from FBI headquarters to search Moussoui's computer and belongings under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. They believe this could reveal what he's planning. The request goes to the same radical fundamentalist unit at FBI headquarters that had received the Phoenix Memo 1 month earlier. But there's a problem beyond simple bureaucracy, a legal problem that's been constraining FBI operations since 1995. In 1995, the Justice Department established what became known as the Wall. This was a strict legal barrier separating intelligence investigations from criminal investigations. The barrier was created with good intentions, to prevent abuses of surveillance powers and protect civil liberties. But by 2001, the Wall had created a serious operational problem. FBI agents working on intelligence cases couldn't easily share information with agents working on criminal cases. Intelligence gathered under FISA warrants couldn't be used in criminal prosecutions without risking the entire case. Officials at the radical fundamentalist unit weren't just being cautious about the Moussaoui warrant, they were genuinely concerned about breaching the Wall. They feared that approving a FISA warrant for someone who might end up in criminal court could violate federal law and jeopardize future terrorism prosecutions. The legal rules designed to protect Americans' rights were preventing the FBI from investigating a terrorist planning to kill Americans. FBI headquarters denies Minneapolis's request for a warrant. Officials argue that Minneapolis hasn't provided enough evidence that Moussaoui is an agent of a foreign power, the legal standard required for a FISA warrant. The Minneapolis agents are furious. They continue pushing headquarters for approval. They send increasingly urgent messages. One supervisor later describes trying to get headquarters spun up about the threat. Headquarters remains unmoved. The legal requirements, as they understand them, haven't been met. If headquarters had acted on the Phoenix Memo, agents would have been looking for exactly what Minneapolis had found. A foreign national with terrorist connections training to fly commercial aircraft. If the Minneapolis agents had known about the Phoenix Memo, they could have referenced it to strengthen their case for a warrant. Williams's warning about a coordinated Al-Qaeda effort in flight schools would have provided additional context. If someone had connected both pieces of information, the pattern would have been unmistakable. But the two pieces of information never connected. The Phoenix Memo sat in the system, not widely distributed. The Minneapolis investigation was handled by a few officials at headquarters who weren't aware of Williams' warning. Congressional investigators will later document that FBI lawyers working on the Moussaoui warrant were completely unaware the Phoenix Memo existed. They will testify that if they had known about it, the memo would have strengthened their case significantly, and the Wall made it even harder for different parts of the FBI to coordinate. Information was compartmentalized. Intelligence agents and criminal agents operated in separate spheres. The legal constraints prevented the kind of free-flowing information sharing that might have connected the dots. Moussaoui remains in FBI custody on immigration charges through late August and into September, but his computer and belongings are never searched before September 11th. After the attacks, when they finally search his computer, they find evidence connecting him directly to the 9/11 plot. The information that might have unraveled the conspiracy was sitting in an FBI evidence room, locked away by legal constraints and bureaucratic failures. September 11, 2001 begins as a clear, bright Tuesday morning. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 hits the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 hits the South Tower.
Flew low and slammed into the Pentagon.
At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. At 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashes in a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fight the hijackers. Nearly 3,000 people are killed, the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. FBI officers across the country immediately mobilize. Agents begin the massive investigation to identify who planned the attacks and whether more are coming. In Phoenix, Kenneth Williams becomes the lead agent for the FBI's 9/11 investigation in Arizona. He will work 16 to 18-hour days for months. Within days, investigators identify all 19 hijackers. The pattern becomes clear. All were Al-Qaeda operatives. Several had received flight training in the United States. One hijacker's name stands out to Williams, Hani Hanjour, the pilot who flew American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon. Hanjour had trained at multiple flight schools in Arizona, including schools Williams had been investigating. Congressional investigators will later find that Hanjour had associated with an individual mentioned in Williams's Phoenix Memo. They had trained together at an Arizona flight school in 1997. The connection Williams had warned about had been real. Terrorists were using US flight schools to train for exactly the kind of attack that just happened.
And initially we were way overwhelmed by the casualties. Every 20, 30 seconds, you'd see somebody stumble out of this open doorway.
In May 2002, the Phoenix Memo becomes public. The Associated Press obtains it and publishes the details. The revelation creates an immediate political firestorm. A specific, detailed warning about terrorists in flight schools had reached FBI headquarters 2 months before the attacks, and nothing had been done. Congress demands answers. The House and Senate Intelligence Committees convene joint hearings. Kenneth Williams testifies behind a screen to protect his identity because he's still working on sensitive counter-terrorism cases. Williams explains that when he wrote the memo, he didn't envision planes being flown into buildings. He saw a suspicious pattern worth investigating. He wanted headquarters to evaluate whether it was part of a broader threat. He describes how headquarters had reduced analytical support to field officers, making it harder for agents like him to get the help they needed. FBI Director Robert Mueller testifies emotionally before Congress. He acknowledges the Phoenix Memo should have been disseminated to all field officers and shared with other intelligence agencies. It should have triggered a broader analytical approach to the threat. Mueller describes the failure as systemic, not individual. The FBI's analytical capabilities were inadequate. Information sharing systems were broken. Different parts of the organization weren't communicating effectively. Eleanor Hill, Staff Director for the Joint Congressional Inquiry, presents devastating findings. The memo reached multiple FBI officials, but was never elevated to senior leadership. The recommendations were rejected without serious consideration. The information was never connected to the Moussaoui investigation or to other intelligence about aviation-based threats. Hill's conclusion is carefully worded but clear. No one can say whether acting on the Phoenix Memo would have prevented 9/11. The specific hijackers Williams mentioned in his memo weren't the ones who carried out the attacks. But she notes something important. If the FBI had opened investigations based on Williams' recommendations, they might have developed investigative interest in Hani Hanjour through his association with people Williams had identified. And that investigation might have led somewhere. As she tells Congress, no one will ever know whether a greater focus on the connection between these events would have led to the unravelling of the September 11th plot. One month after the Phoenix Memo becomes public, another FBI agent comes forward. Colleen Rowley, the legal counsel for the FBI's Minneapolis office, writes a 13-page memo to FBI Director Mueller. She hand-delivers it to Mueller and to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Rowley invokes the Federal Whistleblower Protection Act. Her memo describes how FBI headquarters had actively obstructed the Minneapolis investigation of Zacarias Moussaoui, how officials had changed the language in warrant applications to make them less likely to be approved, how headquarters had dismissed field agents' urgent warnings. Rowley's memo makes a devastating point. The Phoenix Memo and the Moussaoui investigation weren't isolated incidents. They revealed a deeper problem with how the FBI operated. A culture where headquarters dismiss field intelligence, where bureaucratic caution took precedence over aggressive investigation, where different officers didn't communicate. Rowley's whistleblower memo intensifies the political pressure. If two different field officers had critical intelligence that headquarters ignored, the problem was clearly institutional. The 9/11 Commission's final report, released in July 2004, makes specific findings about the Phoenix Memo. The Commission concludes that if officials handling the Moussaoui case had known about Williams' warning, they might have pursued the investigation more aggressively. The memo could have sensitized the FBI to the flight school threat. The Commission recommends sweeping changes to how US intelligence agencies operate, better information sharing, stronger analytical capabilities, breaking down barriers between agencies. The FBI undergoes massive reorganization. The Bureau creates a new intelligence branch, hires hundreds of analysts, builds new information sharing systems, establishes protocols to ensure field office intelligence reaches senior leadership. The legal barrier known as the wall is dismantled. The USA Patriot Act, passed in October 2001, explicitly allows intelligence and criminal investigators to share information more freely. The legal constraints that had prevented the Moussaoui warrant are removed. The FBI establishes new procedures for handling intelligence from field officers. Communications are now flagged more systematically. Recommendations for investigations receive formal review processes. Information is automatically shared across field officers and with other agencies. The Phoenix Memo becomes required reading at FBI training academies. New agents study it as a case example of how field intelligence can be critical and how catastrophic the consequences are when warnings are ignored. The reforms address specific procedural failures, but they can't solve the fundamental challenge Williams' memo exposed. Intelligence agencies receive thousands of warnings. Most turn out to be nothing. The question remains, how do you identify which warnings matter before an attack happens? The FBI agent in Phoenix sent a 5-page memo to headquarters warning that terrorists might be training at US flight schools. He made 4 specific recommendations about what the FBI should do. The memo reached FBI headquarters within minutes. At least 12 officials saw it. 63 days later, 19 hijackers carried out the exact type of attack Williams had warned about. One of those hijackers, Hani Hanjour, had trained at Arizona flight schools. He had associated with people Williams was investigating. Another terrorist, Zacarias Moussaoui, was in FBI custody with evidence on his computer that could have revealed the plot. The information existed, the connections existed. They were never made, not because one person failed, because the system was designed in a way that made failure almost inevitable. Legal barriers prevented information sharing. Bureaucratic structures isolated different offices from each other. There was no effective mechanism to connect warnings from different field officers or to elevate urgent intelligence to decision makers who could act on it. Kenneth Williams worked for the FBI for years after 9/11, continuing in counter-terrorism. After retiring, he defied FBI orders and chose to help 9/11 victims' families in their lawsuit against Saudi Arabia. He believed they deserved answers. The Phoenix Memo is now required reading for new FBI agents. They study it to understand how critical field intelligence can be and how catastrophic the consequences are when warnings are ignored. No one will ever know whether acting on the Phoenix Memo would have stopped September 11th, but everyone knows this. The warning was there, in black and white, 63 days before the attack. It just wasn't heard.